building a platform with purpose. We are so excited to have our outstanding guest for the evening. Can't wait to tell you more about her, but first, let's talk about today's focus. Today, we're going to teach you about how to build, implement, and scale a meaningful service initiative that creates measurable impact, not just a concept that simply looks good on paper. We are so lucky to have our guest tonight, Sarah Hyder, and she's Miss Ohio 2015 and Miss Ohio's Outstanding Teen 2008. Sarah began her journey with the Miss Ohio Scholarship Program when she was crowned Miss Ohio's Outstanding Teen in 2008. She went on to compete in Miss Ohio 3 times before capturing the Preliminary Talent Award for her vocal performance and the Miss Ohio 2015 crown, becoming the first and the only woman to have held both teen and Miss titles in the state of Ohio. With the scholarship dollars Sarah earned, she was able to graduate from Ohio University with her Bachelor's of Science in Journalism and complete her Master's in Public Administration at Kent State University. The last 6+ years, Sarah has dedicated her career to inspiring girls to be joyful, healthy, and confident as the executive director of Girls on the Run of Central Ohio, a nonprofit after-school program for girls grades 3 through 8 that uses running as a platform for social emotional learning. Sarah manages fundraising, campaigns, events, and grants in effort to make social emotional learning available to all girls. Sarah also served as the judges coordinator for the Miss Ohio Teen Competition from 2020 to 2024. In her spare time, she enjoys long walks with her Chihuahua rescue puppy, Rennie, Pilates, and visiting her family in her hometown of Hoosier, Ohio. So everybody, welcome to Sarah. We're so excited to have you with us today. Oh, sorry. I'm so sorry, Sarah. One more second, because now I can't hear you.
That was my fault that time.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yes, welcome.
Yes, I was saying hello. Good to see also my Miss America sister, Autumn.
Yeah. So for those of you who are on the call with us or watching it back afterwards, we were so fortunate to go to Miss America together, and we almost went to Miss America's Teen together.
Almost. Were you
one year before you?
Or okay.
Yeah. So love that. Welcome to our era of pageantry. And Sarah has a lot of wisdom and knowledge to bring, and not only in your work as a title holder, both teen and miss, and the years of dedication you gave to the program, both during that time and after, but in your current role. And this is one of the reasons I reached out to Sarah for this masterclass, because she had posted one day on Instagram about some work she was doing with Girls on the Run. And I was like, oh my gosh, like, you're in it. You're in those places where so many girls want to connect with these types of organizations like Girls on the Run. And you have so much great insider knowledge into what it takes to build a platform and have community outreach that really makes a difference. So we're really excited to have you with us today. We're going to go ahead and hop into our session goals. So goal number 1 for today is going to be to provide a roadmap for developing or refining your platform, creating a clear understanding of how to measure success, and cultivating goals to scale your initiative through strategy, but not overwhelm yourself. So these are really important things, because even like I said at the beginning, you can create a platform that looks great on paper, but actually having things that are tangible that you can show community impact with are far more important in that interview room, and especially when it comes to capturing the title. So that's what we really want to focus our energy on today. And I want to start by just hearing your story, right? Like, we've heard a little bit in your bio, but I want to hear it, from you directly. So I've got, a couple prompt questions on there to inspire you, but I really just want to hear your story in the Miss America organization and how that got you to where you are today.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It is so fun to do something pageant related as well, and also be able to combine both my love for nonprofit work and for MAO. And truly, I don't know that I would be exactly in this career, and I definitely don't think I'd be as far along in my career if I had not been involved in the Miss America organization. I grew up in a family that was always volunteering, always giving back to the community, and my mom was a teacher, which we all know those are our number one givers in many of our communities. And so I always just grew up in a world volunteering, and then became involved in pageants, where again, I was encouraged to keep volunteering. With looking at the questions, what was your platform in the MAO system? I actually had several platforms throughout my time in MAO, which I honestly was always sort of nervous about. And I'm sure that's not necessarily something that I'd necessarily like recommend for every single person, but to the same extent, I think until I really found exactly the right platform for me, I think that was what put me over the edge in winning Miss Ohio. So when I competed in the Miss category, let's see, my first platform was about food insecurity. I was volunteering at a food shelter, a food pantry at the time. And so I was using that as a platform. And then the platform, though, that I did win with was called Women Hold Up Half the Sky. And I always said to any judge or any person that I met that I named it that because I wanted someone to have a real takeaway and real food for thought. When, you know, even if it was like, I have 5 seconds with this person to tell them about my platform, I want them to leave thinking about that. So essentially it was really just about female empowerment, women empowerment, very much what I continue to do today. And my focuses were on equal pay and teaching women how to, or especially young girls, really more like high school, college age, early career, how to negotiate a salary, make sure that they were being paid more fairly, just to empower girls. And I did that mostly by sharing my story of coming up through the MAO system, some of the different challenges, of course, that I faced, and how I just worked really hard to get where I was. So those were sort of my main pieces to that platform. The impact that I created, I hope I created an impact. I still get, notes from people, or if I run into people that might have met me during Miss Ohio, they do still remember the time that they met me. And so I hope that that definitely means something to them. I think my biggest impact was definitely in just sharing my story of getting to where I was of being Miss Ohio, and the challenges that I faced very much related to the challenges of being a girl or a woman in our world. And so I was able to really weave those together. And I think that I like to think I inspired some folks. I also, part of my big tagline that I would always share with people, was a huge Taylor Swift fan. Still am a huge Taylor Swift fan. So I always end my speeches, no matter if I was talking to like a Rotary Club or kindergartners, I would always end every speech I gave with a Taylor Swift quote. Being fearless doesn't mean not being afraid. It means being terrified and jumping in anyway. And that was what I always shared with people. And I think that fearlessness is what hopefully resonated with people.
Awesome. I love that.
Yeah, it's something I think that resonates with both my platform and with, any variety of people. So Absolutely. That was something I always shared. Yeah.
So I'm curious, you mentioned you had multiple platforms through your time competing. Do you mind sharing the evolution of how you got from, where you started to where you ended up, like how you felt like you had something you really were passionate about?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. And I don't mind sharing my like weird mistakes that I feel
like great, because we all make them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, as much as you might call it like a mistake because maybe it wasn't like my winning move, I still accomplished a lot during that time, that ultimately has led to coloring my life. So, but anyway, I was actually thinking about this today because I actually had to think back, what was my platform when I was a teen? Because it's been many years. But My teen when I was my platform when I was a teen was actually HIV/AIDS awareness. And I had just seen a Lifetime movie about HIV/AIDS awareness. And for whatever reason, it just really struck a chord with me. And I think I kind of like to push the envelope a little bit. And so I felt like this was like an issue, both in like our country as well as a national issue, obviously. And keep in mind too, this was many years ago. So
Right.
more of a timely thing. But I do think it is very interesting that
I'm actually kind of shocked. Like, as a teen, that is such a serious initiative to take on.
Yeah, I think that's why I chose it. I always think that I kind of felt this way, honestly, when I was Miss Ohio too, that I always felt like, honestly, like pushing the envelope a little bit and being a little bit more serious was sort of my edge, if that makes sense. Like still being approachable and warm, but I definitely never got any like comments back on a, judging sheet or something that was like, oh, she's just so bubbly, and not that being bubbly is a bad quality, but
it just wasn't yours.
It wasn't mine. And I think so before Miss America too, I actually competed in National American Miss for 6 years. And I think at that time, I always felt like at least that like I was supposed to be bubbly and, sort of that was the mold I was supposed to fit in. And I think that's what I liked about the Miss America organization, though, was I felt like I was really welcomed to be like very intelligent, very hard hitting with the things that I cared about. Yeah. That being said, I still do honestly think it was kind of a interesting choice, but I did a couple of fundraisers and things. And one interesting thing that I think is relevant for people competing too is that was still my platform my first year that I competed in Miss, because I went right away into Miss. I think I gave up my teen state title and 3 weeks later won my Miss preliminary Miss Ohio. And so I kept with that same platform. And one of my questions at Miss Ohio that year was, as Miss Ohio, you're likely going to be going to a lot of elementary schools. How are you going to talk about this platform? And to be honest, I was like, I don't really know. It wasn't something that I had honestly thought that much about. And so I think that's, something to consider, and was obviously a big takeaway for me was, maybe there's an element of this thing that I care about that could be used in a platform. But am I kind of siloing myself by like picking this very like one specific topic that might be appropriate for every generation? So I thought that was, a really interesting takeaway for me. And then I think so then the next year I changed my platform. I cannot remember what my fun tagline was for it. I should have looked up some of my old paperwork, but it was all about supporting food pantries, food insecurity. At the time, I was a sophomore at Ohio University in Appalachia and was volunteering daily at the food pantry there, and was able to host some special evenings of food and entertainment and things. And so it was something that really spoke to me at the time. So I think it really did fit for me at the time. And I think maybe if everything else had been where it needed to be, I could have probably won with that platform, because I think that one was definitely very well thought out and very scalable, all of those sort of things. But then when I went on to compete in Miss Ohio the year that I won, so I competed in Miss Ohio when I was 18 and 19, and then not again until I was 23. So I took a break, came back, and I had been interning at the Women's Fund of Central Ohio, and just everything felt like it was like coming to life for me when I was working there in all kinds of different ways. And so I just decided that I wanted to make that my platform. I felt like it was relevant at the time. I felt like it's actually kind of funny. I feel like it was a little cutting edge at the time to specifically say like women's rights. I had many people in my mock interviews getting ready for Miss Ohio.
Mhm.
So I needed to delete the word feminist from my paperwork.
Mhm.
So at the time, it was sort of pushing the envelope a little bit.
Yeah.
And so obviously that fulfilled me pushing the envelope. And yeah, I mean, it just was what it's what I still do now. So clearly it was just sort of finding my calling. Yeah.
Yeah. It was interesting you talking about like women's pay being such, an issue of the time and something that was really talked about. And now like it kind of feels like we're still talking about that 10 years later. And you talked about, women in certain areas and like the word feminism, which is interesting. I feel like that is currently feels like a hot button controversial thing to include when it didn't for 10 years almost, right? I had a similar instance since we're talking about this specific scenario where at the time when we were competing in 2015, my platform was about veterans and helping homeless veterans. So one of my key questions was, should women be in positions of combat? We're having the same conversation 10 years later. And so it's interesting, to look at, things that were very heightened at the time coming back. And I would encourage people who are developing platforms now to really look at the history of the issues that you are going into, knowing, what is being talked about, what was talked about, how have we progressed. I think it's really important when looking into, what you're passionate about, what you want to speak about. I love that you shared how your platforms of the time correlated so strongly to what you were passionate about at those ages, and the fact that you gave yourself permission to change that as you evolved as a person. I think a lot of people start with a platform, they stick with it because they feel like I've already given so much work to this and I don't want to start over. So what would you say to someone who has been competing for years? They've developed a platform. They're not sure if it's hitting, but man, they've given 3+ years to this, countless volunteer hours. Do they just scrap it from their paperwork and say, well, I'm going to start over with a new platform and I guess I can't use that stuff anymore?
Yeah.
What's your information to give them?
Yeah. So I would say, and I've now judged many pageants, both preliminaries for Miss Ohio Teen, Miss Ohio, and local festival sort of pageants. And I think one of the best pieces of advice that I have, whether it's your platform or really any phase of competition, is that the judges don't really know who you were 6 months ago, a year ago. They don't know about how you didn't do that well singing that song 3 years ago at this preliminary. And I think that was something that I really overcame. And I was really only able to overcome it because no one ever gave me that advice. I had to literally take that like 3 or 4 year gap to kind of feel like I shed my skin of like all of my past like competitions. I felt like I was the first Miss Ohio Teen also to go on to even compete in Miss. And so I was so like stuck with like feeling like all of these things that people have said about me or like I've felt about myself even. I was so stuck with all of that and feeling like that was who I was. And that's what the judges were seeing, that I was definitely holding myself back. So I always like to share that, again, platform, talent, whatever it is, the judges are only judging directly what is in front of them in that moment. And so what you share with them is what you'll be judged on. And so I definitely was concerned. I didn't ever want to seem like wishy-washy or like I was just throwing spaghetti at the wall or whatever and kind of seeing what stuck. I think I was always intentional in my platforms and that helped. But I think just knowing that if it's going to serve you and make you better and it's who you are today, you're going to speak to it better. You're going to plan for it better as a potential title holder. I think keeping all of those things in mind is what you can use to make the decision. I also think you can keep all of those great things that you did on your resume. And you can even find some ways that a new platform, kind of aids with what your old platform is and all of those sort of things. But I think you can still very much keep it on your resume. And if someone did ask, because I could see as a judge, if I saw, like every accomplishment basically on this person's resume was to do with like American Heart Association, and then all of a sudden their platform was LLS or something, I might be like, oh, okay, like, why did you make that switch? And I think personally, if someone said to me, I still really care about that other thing, but this is what is calling me now. This is where my heart is. And this is where I can see my vision as a title holder going. And that's why I made that switch. I would be like, great. Okay. She knows who she is. And she's not afraid to, I think, like, not being afraid to say no to, like, you're not saying no to someone else necessarily, but you're saying, you're not just going with like what has been or going with the flow because you feel like that's what you have to do.
Right.
You're breaking out of any pressure on yourself to just be yourself. And I think that authenticity shows up in an interview and will score you points beyond anything else.
Yeah. For our listeners, I really want you to pay attention to how Sarah said that, because I think you're right. You can tell them, this is the vision that I see for myself as a title holder, and this is where I see myself going, and this is where I see, potential for our organization and my work to come together. That, to me, the words you just use, that would sell me as a judge, to be like, oh, she's confident in her choice. But I think it can get confusing if you're like, oh, I've raised $10,000 for PCOS, and now I'm going to go talk about suicide awareness. And like, I, as a judge, I could look at that and be like, why? I mean, and now you're spending time talking about that and not talking about your platform. And the way that you worded that was so strong and confident that as a judge, I'm like, now I look at those 10,000 hours or dollars or whatever, and I go, oh, she has dedication, and she's going to apply that here. So I think the lesson here too, and the takeaway, is your delivery and how you sell that switch. I didn't intend for us to talk about switching platforms tonight, but the fact that you did, and I think a lot of girls experience that question for themselves, is they're like, do I need to change this? I don't know. That's scary. Yeah. So I'm glad it came up, because I think it's a good point of discussion. I'm going to move us forward with the next component, but a great side tangent. Love that. Okay, so every contestant can talk about their why, but only a few can talk about and show the how. So we're going to focus our attention now on turning your idea into something that is visible and a scalable movement. We're going to come back to the word scalable a lot today, so be prepared for your ears to hear it. I'm going to let Sarah kind of take the lead on this to talk about the steps that we're going to go through to go from concept to plan to measurable growth. And I might chit chat in here and then with you about some of the things that come up, but I'd love to hear your takeaways on these ideas.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think overall, one of the things too that I look for when I am judging, clarity in the platform is of course great. And I think also understanding the true impact of your platform, like in that quote before, is extremely, extremely important. So I think with clarifying the foundation of your platform, knowing what problem you're solving, obviously that is incredibly important. And I think something to consider too is really like the ethos of your platform within the world, not just maybe if you're, say, breast cancer work is your platform, knowing too how maybe people who are facing food insecurity or poverty, those sort of things, are impacted by breast cancer, and how all of these things sort of tie together, I think is really important, while also keeping specific with your platform, knowing who you're helping, sort of along the same lines of what I just said of, is there an element of, if something like breast cancer is your platform, is there people that need to be reached that aren't being reached because of their life circumstances? Who are you helping? I think that's a great question to ask. And why are you the right person to lead this cause? I think is probably the most important, because if you don't sell it to me that you are the right person to lead this cause, then we've got some work to do for sure. So I think considering, of course, your own life experience and how it relates to you personally is obviously the best thing that you can lead with in figuring out why you are the right person to lead this cause. And I think that being said, though, sometimes in pageantry, and I don't think this happens quite as much, but Autumn, I do feel like this happened quite a bit sometimes in our era of this like really intense, like deep storytelling of like, you know, this horrible thing happened to me and that's why it's my platform. And while everyone's story is relevant, I think that's exactly it, is knowing everyone's story is relevant. So I felt like I didn't necessarily have something like traumatic that happened to me, but I was aware of the effects and was also kind of always talking about how grateful I was to be, you know, like raised in the family that I was, because I grew up with a matriarchal family. So I knew nothing but women leadership. And going into the real world, though, and not seeing that as much made me sort of understand that. So I think understanding why you are the right person to lead this cause is extremely important, and also is tied to why are you the right person to be your state or whichever level title holder it is. Knowing why you are the right person is extremely important.
Absolutely. And you know, sometimes you are the right person because your platform is totally tied to your identity and your experiences, right? But I think the question is bigger, is why are you the person to be the voice for that issue on a larger scale? And your personal experiences can kind of elevate your voice, can give you a foundation for, you know, like having a horse in the race, so to speak. But you also have to think about, you know, there are other people who may have those shared experiences, and you can't speak for them, but you can elevate them, you can highlight them. And you don't have to have a personal anecdote or a trauma or something that's happened to you to be able to speak to a cause either. It can truly just be something you are extremely passionate about. But something you said earlier is, yeah, then your job is not to necessarily share your personal story, but it is to highlight, elevate, uplift the other people who have these experiences. And really selling that to the judges, man, that's make or break.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yes, definitely. Should I go with the
yes, please
framework? Awesome. And Autumn did all of this, by the way, and this is the most beautiful presentation I've ever seen about platform work ever. So just making sure that I don't get any credit for this layout, because you've done an amazing job with this. So Autumn has it laid out as a 3-part foundation framework. So creating a problem statement, define it simply, show a personal connection, why it matters to you. We talked about that. And establishing community relevance, why it matters to others. These are all, it's all kind of what we just talked about too. Inadvertently.
And that's basically writing your service initiative paperwork. For us, it was a platform statement. Now they call it a community service initiative. It's all the same thing.
It's all the same thing, yeah. Yes, and I will say too, is kind of on the topic of the paperwork, that I think in seeing a lot of paperwork come through, that I would encourage people to work on storytelling in their platform statement, and trying to find like a unique angle to start with, if that makes sense. So like writing it in more of a narrative sort of way at the beginning, at least, and then wrapping it with something at the end. Like I remember, and one of the reasons I felt so confident walking into my Miss Ohio interview was I had this kind of like bomb drop statement at the very beginning of my platform statement, and I knew it set me apart, and I wrapped it all up at the end by, you know, bringing the first sentence back to the bottom paragraph, and felt like I really brought it all full circle. That being said, another funny story about my paperwork is I actually, like a week before Miss Ohio, I found a typo in the very first sentence, in that bomb drop sentence.
Oh, no.
I found a typo, and it was like I'd put is twice, is twice. And I have a journalism degree. And so to me, like, I'm like, oh my gosh, these judges are done with me already. They're like, this girl has a journalism degree and she has a typo. That's not okay. I definitely had a mental breakdown to my mom about it, considered like not even competing, which is like a little bit dramatic, but I just was like, I can't have a typo. And I remember actually after I won, immediately talking to the judges. And one of the first things I said to them was, I was so scared I wasn't going to do well because I had a typo in my paperwork, and they were like, we never noticed that. So as much as like I encourage very thorough editing and proofreading and work on your paperwork, also know it is actually okay to make mistakes too.
Yeah. We got to be human. Maybe that's like a surefire way to show that AI didn't write your paper.
You know what? I was thinking about that too, that I'm sure there is some AI paperwork going on here. And I will say I am not anti-AI, but I do think making it as personal as possible and communication skills are so important. And I think when I'm judging, I always think about, I hope that this being part of Miss America is also like a career development opportunity. And so I want to see how someone communicates. I think of the platform statement as almost like a really long email about what they're up to at their job. And I think making sure that feels authentic and real is very important.
Yeah. So, you mentioned, at the beginning of the paperwork, and what we're really talking about here when you're writing your paperwork is developing your platform, because you're literally laying it out. It's essentially, it's like your business plan in a lot of ways, right? Here's my plan for the entire year right here, why it's important, what I'm going to do with it, or what I've already done with it, hopefully. And all of that being kind of at the beginning, you talked about like a strong opener. I like to think of it like a great TikTok.
Yes.
A really good TikToks have a hook so that you don't swipe away. And if you think about that at the beginning of your statement of like, pay attention to me, don't go away, this is important. In that first paragraph, even if it's narrative, because a lot of TikToks are narratives to bring you in, right? Personal anecdotes, something that's really going to make you feel connected to that video. Well, you want them to feel connected to you through this paperwork too, to feel like it is a component of you. And we've talked about the 3-part framework. I really feel passionate about that going in the beginning, like right at the top of your paper. So I want to know immediately, what is set the scene for me? What am I going to get from you in this paper? So that way the rest of it is basically just like me filling in the roadmap in my brain that you've laid out, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I think thinking of it as a business plan is the best thing you can do. Yeah.
Right. Now, a good business plan has direction. And so that's what I want to make sure we're going to focus on a little bit more in part 2 and 3, but part 1 is the setup, right? You can't have the tangible, the measurable, the scalable until you really know what you're trying to advocate for. So we've talked a lot about, you solving a problem, actually understanding the community that you're helping. I can tell immediately as a judge if you came up with a platform to be a winner or if you came up with a platform to serve. And it usually goes back to, is there a specific group you're helping, and do you actually understand the issue at hand and why you should be involved in it? So we've given you, listeners, that we've given you the essentials to make that statement. So Some of you may already have these created. Some of you might want to test the waters here. So I'm going to offer you the opportunity in the chat to post anonymously. There's that little button you can click. If you have a mission statement in your paper, if you have these pieces, or you want to put something together now to pop in the chat and have us review it live and anonymously, feel free to drop that in. We're going to continue on the presentation, and if any of you put them in throughout our conversation, we'll review them, let you know our overall thoughts on them if we really feel like you've answered the questions that are here. If you want to screenshot this really quick, I'm going to move away from this part of the presentation, but it's a great opportunity for you to have two people who have both judged Miss America state competitions, who have been on the other side, both as a title holder and as people who have judged, and as people who have worked with state organizations. So I would take this up if I were you. We are going to keep going here onto our next slide. So next up, we're going to talk about step 2. So the how, turning that idea, that initial idea that you want to make for change, into an action. So Sarah, do you want to talk to us a little bit more about these particular steps in the how?
Absolutely. So this idea of starting small and starting local, I think, is extremely important. I think about, and I know we're talking about scaling and things too a little bit more later, but I think starting with that tangible small thing, your local schools, your local nonprofits, community organizations, those are the people that are going to, because you have that local tie, they are going to be the ones who I think are most likely to invite you in to be part of the work. So I think of some of the smaller things that I did as a local title holder, because I do think there can be some nervousness in reaching out to more people than maybe the area that you represent if you aren't the state title holder yet, which I think is totally understandable. But so I reached out to actually my middle school from when I went to school and said, hey, I have this idea. I want to come speak to the middle schools at lunchtime and talk to them about women empowerment. And they said, okay. And honestly, I'm sort of surprised in some ways that they did, because I think something I should have also been prepared with that I would definitely encourage folks to put forward is, if you have like a slide deck that is what you're going to share, or is a sort of proposal of what you're going to share, I think now too, a lot more schools, especially if you're working with schools, which I do think schools is a very good first step. There is a lot more control in what programming is being put into the universe. So I think being upfront with what sort of program you want to provide is really important, and will help you be taken more seriously too, because I think we all still face some stigma around being a title holder. It can help you a lot, but it can also, honestly, people don't always get it, to be honest. So I think that showing that, again, you are creating a business plan, that you have goals and objectives is really helpful. And I also think a first step that is helpful too is honestly just volunteering with an organization that's maybe related to what your platform is, if your platform is like a broader sort of cause. So something to know too, straight from the mouth of a nonprofit professional, is that not all organizations actually allow you to either come in and do programming, or to even be officially partnered with a local title holder. So I will say, at Girls on the Run, we as a national organization and our local chapters are not allowed to like at our events have any girls wearing crown and sashes. We're not allowed to be officially like someone's platform or associated with them officially. That being said, every year for my 5Ks, I have singers. So I need a national anthem singer. I always have a Miss Ohio or Miss Ohio teen contestant come do my national anthem. I've had teen title holders come and volunteer at our 5Ks. And I think that's an opportunity too, to really actually get to know the audience that you're working with, that you supposedly care about, getting to know that, and making that impact. And a piece too of advice that again relates to platform, but sort of is a all-encompassing sort of mentality that I definitely had when I was Miss Ohio, is that the way that you carry yourself, present yourself, and interact with people, you shouldn't have to have a crown on to know that that person is special. I wanted everyone to meet me without knowing that I was Miss Ohio, look me up on like Instagram later to, you know, stay connected with me, and then be like, oh my gosh, like that was Miss Ohio. Like, not surprised, but like very cool. So keeping that in mind, I think knowing too that if you are looking to work more with like a larger organization, an established organization like Girls on the Run, that might be a little bit of a hurdle for you, that you might not be able to partner in the way that you originally envision, but just knowing that even though I have to be like, no, I'm sorry, you know, you can't wear your crown and banner here, does not mean that there are not volunteer opportunities for you to really make an impact. And again, those are the things that I see on a platform statement. I want to see like hours and what events you volunteered at versus looking at an Instagram photo of you with your crown and banner on, like posing in front of something.
So it has become, I would say in the last 5 years, extremely important. I mean, I'll say it as it is, trendy, but important to be able to use the words or the phrase, I've been able to partner with. I feel like I hear it out of every single title holder's mouth, to the point that it's becoming less impactful. And also to the point that it makes me question, what is the depth of that partnership? Like, did you do a social media post for them once and now they're your partner? That doesn't actually say much to me. Have you actually showed up for several events for them? Have you volunteered many hours for them? Have they also acknowledged that partnership? Those are important things to recognize, because when I look at your paperwork and I'm reading through, if you're partnered with, for instance, Girls on the Run, but I haven't seen a single activity that you've done with them, they just go well with your cause, that doesn't speak to the depth of the platform's partnership. So it's something to consider. Now, as someone who works for a nonprofit, as somebody who understands why a title holder would be seeking that word, okay, what would be your suggestion of how to initiate, whether it's with Girls on the Run or any organization, how to initiate that contact, right? Do you send an email, a DM on Instagram? I mean, some places respond better in certain ways, depending on who runs the organization. What would you suggest the process to be for girls who are like, I want a partnership and I do want it to have depth, but I don't know how to start this?
Yeah. Well, I would say that most nonprofit websites are probably going to list like initial one-time volunteer opportunities that you can find and sign up for by yourself online. If you volunteer at my 5K for me, and I like didn't even really know about it, and you reach out to me and email me later and say, hey, I volunteered at the 5K. It was an incredible experience. I'd like to get more depth in this. That's definitely one thing that's going to catch my attention a lot more, because you've already proven to me that you are caring more about the people that I'm serving versus making a name for yourself. And so I think showing like a little ounce of like dedication to begin with, like, I think can really make a difference. And I think even just understanding, like you said, like another story for you is I had a friend of mine who was judging, and someone that was competing said that they had partnered with my organization. And she texted me and was like, hey, do you know this girl? And I was like, I don't know her. I do work with thousands of volunteers every year, though. So it is possible she volunteered for us and I didn't know it. But I was very like, taken aback that someone would say that they partnered with us when they in our idea of a partnership truly had not. So I think that's just another example of, trying to like make something grander than it is, make it something it's not, just to sound impressive, can really come back to bite you, actually. So I think, like I said, those small opportunities where you can really prove that you already care about something, I will find more of a seat at the table for you. Like for instance, actually our reigning Miss Ohio, Olivia, she is a beautiful singer, and she she asked about singing the 5K at the 5K a couple of times. And so I said, absolutely, yes, but you can't wear any of your garb, because our 5K, the focus is on the girls. It's not about anyone else being special except girls. And she was 100% fine with that, totally down. And then she asked about some more volunteer opportunities. And I just told her basically, here's our committees. Like we have lots of professional committees that also give you experience, hopefully for your future outside of pageantry as well. And she joined our event fundraising committee. And this was all right before she won Miss Ohio. So I think also reaching out to find out if there are committees that you could serve on. And I think, again, leading with that idea of, yes, it's going to help you as part of your pageant platform. It's going to be something on your pageant resume, but I'd be more impressed by something that's also maybe related to something you're developing for your career too. Yeah. So like a marketing major being on the nonprofit's marketing committee, I would be like, I love this girl.
Absolutely. Okay. So here in step 2, in step 1, we talked about how do I get out there? And, you even said you said your local middle school.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of girls make it into be a grander thing that it necessarily needs to be, like how to go out and make impact. I also think there's a lot of people who are afraid to simply pick up the phone and call and to put it out there. I want to start, I want to go back just a minute. You said, start local, start small. Some of the best places to go out and make an impact are also the Lions Club, the local, area organizations, the Kiwanis Club. They love to come have speakers come in. That's another opportunity for you to give a presentation, for you to speak about your service initiative. Great opportunity for you to get those interview nerves out and jitters. And you never know what type of community connections they may have. Because, for instance, I think I want to say it's the Kiwanis have a connection with like the Boys and Girls Club. And you never know what other community organizations you're going to be able to tap into simply because of who you know. And a lot of them are run by older generations where your point of contact to reach out to them is going to be a simple phone call, but most of the time they would be elated for you to have you come. And those are the types of things that get you into the how. Count the people in the room. Okay. Did you speak to a Kiwanis Club and there's 20 people? Great. Add that to your tally of people you've impacted. Because then on your paperwork, when you get to say that sure, you went into 20 classrooms. Okay. How many kids were in each classroom? Roughly 20. Fantastic. Now, you're in the hundreds of people that you've impacted. A lot of people look for grand ways to show their impact. And I get it. I help people write paperwork all the time, and I understand that. But you being able to say, I've made an impact with my service initiative with over with over 20 schools and 5 different organizations, and over 300 people have been impacted so far, sounds so much cooler than, and I also partnered with an organization.
Yep.
So thinking about the depth of what you're doing, and we just gave you guys a couple different ways to reach out and start small, and then scaling from there. That's what, we're going to talk about as well. How to make that a little bit bigger. So if you're starting small at your hometown school, asking that principal, that superintendent, if they have other points of contact in the community nearby, if they know the principal and the superintendent, if they could give you a recommendation or a reference to their other colleagues, well, now you're going statewide. So, with yours, you have an organization that is nationwide, and I'm sure you deal with the ideas of scalability all the time. Do you have any recommendations for girls who are established locally and they're trying to scale statewide or even regionally, or maybe they're trying to become Miss America and they want to take this across the country? What would your recommendations be there for their platforms?
Yeah. I would think sort of kind of related to what you just said about a national organization is thinking about who else has scaled nationally and who are you connected to. So one of the things beyond a nonprofit, I think of like if I was getting ready for Miss Ohio today and empowering girls was my platform.
Mm-hmm.
There are 6 Girls on the Run councils throughout the state of Ohio. Each of them host a 5K where volunteers are welcome. So I would love to go volunteer in Toledo and volunteer in Cincinnati and be able to put those pieces all on my platform. And I think that's a way to show that you are capable of scaling without having to, you're not really asking for permission to be able to scale. Like you are going for it. Another thing that I think of when, especially if you're college graduate, is if you were part of Greek life. I know when I was Miss Ohio, I went CHIO and I went and spoke at like every single CHIO in our state about my story and my work with the Miss America organization. So I think looking at where those opportunities are, and again, when you're first scaling, I think the idea of scaling, but like keeping it small and intimate in that way of like, okay, I'm going to go to Toledo, which is like 3 hours away from me, but I'm going to volunteer there and get to know that part of the state. And I think that's a piece of it too, is finding either leaders you can talk to or doing whatever research you can and learning about what the needs are in those different areas. If you're scaling nationally, what is that like? Because even here in Ohio, like I said, we have 6 Girls on the Run councils, but each one is very different, serves different populations, faces different problems. So I think trying to find, even if it's those small ways that you're scaling at first, again, it's all a snowball effect. And I always said this when I was Miss Ohio too, that and this kind of leads on to maybe step 2 a little bit too, that like I did one appearance that it was my best friend from college. Her mom was a teacher at another middle school. Apparently that's my crowd. And they invited me to come speak because I had this family friend. So I had sort of my in, but after that, during that time, she had actually called a photographer to come take photographs. And some of the really great photos that you've seen in this presentation were from that. And just posting that, sharing that, really helped me scale. Even though I was already a state title holder, it's still, you're not like, given some outline of like, here's all of the state things you're going to do, and they're all related to you and all of those kinds of things. You still have to build a lot of your year yourself. So even as a state title holder, you're still like always trying to scale bigger and bigger. And I think that would be one of my kind of pro tips, I think, as far as that proof, social proof of those photos, testimonials, those sort of things, that one time get a photographer there, and you can use those photos to really help you share and, like you have there, create visibility and credibility. I mean, when you see those photos of me, I'm talking to like 100-some girls. Like, it built my credibility immediately. So that's an additional tip for scaling as well.
Super smart. So I love that you talked about, the specific photos, because yes, and I included them all over the presentation. So we'll pull up to one soon. But I also spoke with a lot of schools.
Mhm.
A lot of schools. And my crowd was really vast. It was elementary schools, high schools, okay, and then a lot of veterans organizations, right? So I had to think too about making sure you have that credibility in all aspects. And one thing I want to talk about with the scalability is thinking about a issue that can be taken nationwide. Like you mentioned food insecurity earlier. So, if you live in a certain area where, food insecurity is a really big issue in your community, and you have got a local food bank that you can impact, there's food banks all over that you can impact. That's something that's not sequestered just to that one little part of your state, right? That is something that affects everybody across the nation. I think of our current Miss America, who talks about the importance of arts and education. That is something that can be taken nationwide. So you want to think about the scalability, sure, can be your specific idea, to what you do, but perhaps it is also, is my idea going to have an impact beyond my state? And I think that is also the scalability that you can share in your interview. Going back to the credibility, we're talking about sharing on Instagram, specifically TikTok somewhat, but a lot of judges are going to go straight to Instagram, and they do. I don't know if you did during your time judging, but I've spoken to a lot of judges in recent years who say, like, yeah, I go to every single girl's Instagram and I do a deep dive. And I want to see what they've got going on there. And quality oftentimes matters. There are states who give out awards for the best social media. In fact, the national organization gives out state awards for the best social media every year. So it clearly is important. Because it's also a recruitment tool. So we have to think about it. It's helping the overall brand. It's important to put that on there. And those types of photos and testimonials, we have media coverage here. Those are showing on your Instagram that you are more than just a talking head, that you are actually a person of action. And so those in real-time photos, like Sarah was talking about, that she was able to have taken of her in the moment. It's not just her standing and posing, it's her in action. Those speak so much further than, a nice Canva created thing talking about the issue that you are trying to advocate for. So it is important to show credibility within your area. And that only comes from getting out and doing something. The how. How are you going to make an impact? So can you walk us through number 3?
Absolutely. So building consistency, those quarterly, monthly touch points, documenting metrics, attendance, donations, volunteers, hours, partnerships, which we put a pause on that word, but partnerships formed. I think especially the documenting metrics, because I want to see this on social media. I want to see this in a platform statement. And I think knowing that you are paying attention to these metrics makes me think that you get it. I'll be honest, I feel that way at my daily job with some of the people that I work with or that work for me. I'm like, if you are not being succinct, exact, and like measuring your impact at all, you're just floating through space in my mind. So I think documenting those metrics, and a key tip too is, whether you're actually like posting this or whatever it is, but just keeping a hold of it too in like your phone or a personal note or whatever it is, just to make sure that you've got it updated so that the next time you do post about it, you're keeping it accurate. I think one thing that if someone is really doing like their own sort of work as well. So say like if you were doing something for Girls on the Run or something, and you held like a coffee conversation for Girls on the Run, I think a great way to also get some metrics, and you could do this like a Kiwanis thing or something like you said too, Autumn, is to do a survey. And I think if I saw a title holder did a survey and it got results from it, I would be blown away. So, and I think a survey can literally be 1 question, 3 questions. It doesn't have to be a ton, but if you are truly listening to the people that you're hoping to serve or hoping to influence people in how they maybe think about a certain topic, I think there's a lot of easy technology that can allow you also to implement those surveys and actually collect data and be able to reflect on yourself. Yeah.
Wow, what an impactful moment that could be in your interview. Like, I can already see it in an interview. Well, judges, I was able to sit down and survey over 100 young women, and here's what I learned.
Yeah.
And if you word the question to be something you wanted to talk about anyways in your interview, you just took back control of that moment.
Yep.
That is such an impactful. I hope everybody on this call writes this down.
And it is
to be the new trending phrase. Okay.
It's so easy to do, with like QR codes and things. There's a lot of technology out there that I think you can make something like this happen.
Absolutely. Wow. That's fantastic. I love that. I mentioned I worked with veterans. One of the reasons the measurability of something is very important to me is I had to do that. So I worked specifically with homeless veterans, and I did a homeless veterans relief drive. So I had to count every single item that was brought in, find its monetary value at its average monetary value, and then add that up to be my impact. Right. So, over tens of thousands of dollars worth of items that read so well on a piece of paper and in that room to show impact other than just saying, oh yeah, and I help homeless veterans because it's important we say thank you.
Yeah.
I mean, and I know, girls, I'm talking about this from almost like an emotional detached place, very analytical. And I want you to know, like, we choose our platforms because we actually care, right? There's so much more to my platform, to Sarah's platform, to our history that we're not talking about this because that's not the point of this conversation. But I have to sometimes sit back and be strategic about it. Be like, okay, you're here to win. And yes, you're here to make an impact, and it better be to actually serve somebody that's other than you. But you do also have to be strategic about it, and that's okay. Because at the end of the day, the more strategic you are about making your impact, the deeper your impact's actually going to go anyways. So be mindful of that. Okay, so we're going to go on to our official step 3, which is the measuring. Okay, so we've got 3 M's here: metrics, milestones, momentum. If you can talk a little bit more about these points of measurability, or even just one that really stands out to you, I'd love to hear your take on these.
Yeah. Well, we talked a little bit about metrics already. So I think some of those things we talked about, just how important those are. I think looking at milestones and the timeline of key goals, that is definitely something as a judge I am looking for. I'd like it to be somewhat explicit on some paperwork, but also something to talk about in an interview, just verbally too. But I think having those milestones laid out lets me know that you have thought of where this is going to go. And then momentum, I think, is really important as well, tracking the growth over time. I think really when we think of Miss America, a lot of it is about momentum. It's all about the momentum behind all of us as young women. I'm going to still keep myself in the young women category. So tracking that growth, I think, is really important. I'll give you a quick example of a pageant I judged recently that's like a local festival pageant, and a girl had created a like freshman day at her high school. And it's basically an opportunity for the incoming freshmen to be able to like talk to each different club, meet some people. And she also gave out some like mental health first aid kits to make sure that everyone felt confident and good and had the resources they need needed. And she did that just at her high school this fall, but the rest of her district learned about it. And so now when she's not even a platform title holder anymore, or even a student at any of the schools anymore, now that entire district is going to be implementing this new student freshman orientation style. And so, and that even has momentum to go statewide, nationally. So I think that sort of momentum, I like the idea of show me where this came from, like what's the seedling, and then how has it grown so far, and then how will it grow even further.
Yeah.
And I think displaying that too, again, from like a business side is really important too. I think one of the things that really impressed me with the girl that I'm talking about was that I asked her, like, how did you do that? Because, honestly, your mom could have probably called and set that all up for you. So I want to know how did you do that? And she walked me through, like, I contacted my teacher because they were my closest person in the school. And then they contacted the principal, and then they contacted the superintendent. And I think just like really sharing that again too, that like you get the process behind things is really impressive too.
Absolutely. I can't tell you the number of girls I have spoken with who, I'll ask them for their how or their vision or, oh, well, okay, how many people have you talked to about this? And they can't tell me, right? Mm-hmm. So this goes back to keeping the notes for yourself. Mm-hmm. And some people just don't think about it. And that's fine. I hope this session prompts you to think about it. Oh, I could have something really impactful to share in that room if I keep track of it myself, right? The number of schools, looking at, hey, how many people are in this room? And when we talk about momentum and tracking growth over time, you can, maybe you have a type of initiative that you can say, oh, well, it started with just this small community and now I've impacted this many people. Well, you could also say that with a percentage. I've been able to grow my impact by X percentage over 6 months. If you gave me an entire year to do this, here's the numbers I can get to. Yeah. As a judge, I'd be like, wow.
Very wow.
Like 10 out of 10.
Yes.
So thinking about those things. So for our listeners, I would prompt you to go ahead and think about what are some metrics that you currently have in your back pocket. And if you don't have the ones you want, can you set a goal to create those for yourself before your state competition? What can you realistically start tracking? And if you have nothing to track, I would encourage you to find something. And then maybe even using, those Google Forms, surveys, simple spreadsheets to really keep track of it and make a deeper impact. I would come back to the word deep and depth because I really feel that that's important for us to all consider. And we're now onto our final step. So step 4, from our project to our platform. So how can contestants evolve from this one-time event into an ongoing movement, like you just talked about with your person that you judge, something that has ongoing movement, a legacy, if you will, right? Yeah. So we have a couple things here, a couple questions that, maybe we've tackled some of these. I know we definitely tackled scalability, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on some of these final questions.
Yeah. Well, honestly, one of the questions that stood out to me the most when I was reviewing this is the last one, and I'm happy to go back to, but I thought it was a really interesting question of what if my idea needs financial backing? And I think now more than ever, it's easier to do things without as much financial backing. I think when we competed, I don't even think Canva existed. So like you would have had to
PowerPoint.
You would have had to maybe you would have hired a graphic designer or something to come up for your logo of a fund that you're starting or something like that. So I think now there are so many tools that I would really encourage someone to do their best not to necessarily need as much financial backing. Now, that being said, fundraising, I'm all for supporting that. But I think I think back to with Girls on the Run, each of our teams of girls completes a community impact project, but it has to cost them less than $10. And I think that again, as a judge would be, you know, more impressive to me, that someone was resourceful, innovative, and that's not to say again that you can't do a GoFundMe if you need, you know, $50, $100 to accomplish something. I think that that's totally fine too. But I really think trying to do something again as resourcefully as possible. Truly are so many ways to be helpful that do not cost money. And I think that's something that I don't know if it's talked about as much, but I feel like at one point was kind of talked about was the accessibility of pageantry. And I think, I don't know, I'll be more impressed by someone who worked harder with less, I guess, than something that maybe looks flashy or, to be honest, I can even be somewhat skeptical when I see fundraising dollars. You know, how did you, I want to know more about how you did that. And I'm going to be more impressed by how you did that than necessarily the dollar amount that you raised. I've worked with sororities. I've been an advisor for sororities and fundraising for Make-A-Wish Foundation, where I saw girls just ask honestly, and again, I'm speaking somewhat frankly, but kind of just like asking for daddy to open his checkbook and write a check. And that was how they raised an extremely impressive amount of money. And at the end of the day, nonprofits need money. So again, like, I'm not turning away anybody's money. But speaking purely just from a judge's perspective, I think like I want to see what you can do with very little, because as a title holder, you're probably like not making a ton of money, resources, and not having a lot of time either. Very busy. And so I kind of want to see what you can do on like a grassroots level.
Yeah, absolutely.
Something with like extreme financial backing. So,
and you know, something I'll say I've met girls who have, you know, things that they want to spread. So I'm literally just plucking this out of thin air, but like maybe you're somebody who your platform is about women's menstrual cycles and the pink tax, and you want to create little feminine care packages that you give to middle schools, and you're trying to put that together. Like somebody has to buy the stuff that goes in there, right? And if you haven't partnered with Dove to give you free deodorant to go in there, that might be hard to figure out how you're going to purchase those things. So I also think that as a judge, I would enjoy seeing I was able to get financial backing for this project that I worked on to help people. And the how, like you said, pageants are always looking for more sponsors and sponsors who can sponsor scholarships. And if you can show that, oh, well, you know what, I went into the local car dealership and asked them if this was a philanthropy project that they would be willing to help me fund. And you can tell the judges that, there you just opened a potential partnership for scholarship dollars for the program too. And you've showed that you know how to have those conversations. I think that also speaks volumes to your ability as a title holder, right? No, somebody didn't, you know, mom and dad didn't just pay for this for me. I went out into my community. I told them about a cause. I taught them about it, educated them about it. And now they're backing me because they believed in this. And I was able to have that financial discussion, a conversation not a lot of people want to have. And I made it happen. Like as a judge, I also would be equally impressed with that.
Absolutely.
And there's a reason I mentioned car dealership. So for those of you who are listening, go where the money flows. And you might be thinking, like, I never thought to go to a car dealership. They got tax money to burn, okay? They got to put it somewhere. And sometimes they have certain money set aside, more so during the beginning of the fiscal year. So January is your opportunity. Okay. Don't wait till Q4. It's gone. But within Q1 of the fiscal year, they have money that they can set aside to philanthropy projects. So that's a great opportunity for you to take advantage of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that.
Yeah.
I think if you are fearful of fundraising, because I do see every state title holder as part of their job to be fundraising. You are the face of the organization that is handing out scholarships. So you do need to be understanding of some fundraising. I think there's some easy ways to start too, just to get your toes wet. And using the example, like you said, of, menstrual packs or something, I think an easy way to get started before you feel comfortable with that car dealership. Now, if you feel comfortable off the bat, you go for it, because you're a natural born fundraiser, and you can come work for me in a couple of years. But I think one opportunity that didn't exist when we were competing that I think could be really cool too is creating an Amazon wish list and asking people to purchase product for you from that wish list. And I think that's like a really easy step into fundraising. And the fundraising is the love of my life. So I started fundraising. My first fundraising was with the Miss America organization. So I definitely think it's a great time to practice that, because whether you do it in your full-time job or you don't work for a nonprofit, I'd love for my volunteers to go fundraise for me. So you can always use those skills.
100%. Well, we've made it to our end of our presentation, and we've got, our key takeaways here. Ladies, I'm going to let you read these on your own, because we did have people drop some things in the chat. So I'm super excited to go ahead and look at these. I don't know, Sarah, can you also see the chat from your end?
Yes, I believe. Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay, so we're going to start here with Miss Harris, and she has dropped a little bit here for us to take a look at. So her platform statement, she says, super rough, still at least 2 years out from competing again. So she's working through some initial ideas. So what you and I are going to look for here is ways to help her improve, or like first takeaway, do we really understand what it is? Right. So I believe in order to change our future, we must inspire the future. Through my initiative, nameless for now, I aim to demystify law school and the legal profession. While it may be challenging to break into the legal field through mentorship, access to firsthand accounts from legal professionals, and resources to prepare for the application cycle, law school will no longer be a secret code aspiring lawyers feel like they need to crack, but a gateway for the future change makers of this nation. Initial thoughts.
Wow.
Well, I know, I was like, very different.
Yes. Well, and I think that's what this would definitely stand out to me. Absolutely. And I think I'm always going to also be pro anything that's granting access to someone who didn't think previously that they could do it. And so I could definitely see something like this working really well among many different audiences. I think too, if you play it in a way that, if you're going to an elementary school, they might not understand exactly like what it means to be a lawyer, but you standing up there as a woman wanting to go into law, telling them stories of how, and I apologize, I don't know these are necessarily facts off the top of my head, but I'm assuming that there is it's a somewhat male dominated field, I believe still. And so I think, anytime you have that opportunity to tell someone like, okay, you think you can't do it, you can, that's like the bigger message. And so I think that would resonate well with so many different audiences. And I think this is definitely something that I would be interested in. I would have lots of questions. Yeah.
My first question when I read this is, it feels very niche. How are you going to make sure that you impact a lot of different groups of people? Because it's very much for people going into the legal profession, which I think really kind of narrows you into one subset of the population, when as a title holder, you're going to have to meet a lot of different groups of the population. So planning for that in your paperwork, of including the larger message that Sarah said, and being like, the bigger takeaway. Like, here's how I'm going to impact the younger generations to inspire them to even want to go into those fields that they may not think are for them, whatever that may be. And then, like you said, I love that you use the word demystifying. I think a lot of people in high school are hesitant to even go into that field simply because it's intimidating and they may not feel like it's even in the cards for them. So thinking about how you're going to hit all of those age categories that you will, as a title holder, have to interact with, because you're not only going to interact with the group of people who are for sure going into law school. So prepare for that in your overall paper, but it definitely has a hook right away with the mission statement. I'm intrigued immediately. And then my next question is, your how of, how do you plan to utilize mentorship, right? That would be what I would want to see throughout your paper. But right away, I get a good amount of information. So our next one here we have from Anna, it says, fit for the fight, fit for your future, is the quote I always say. Would this be a good opener? This is my mission statement. Fit for Purpose is dedicated to empowering individuals to embrace their bodies, nourish their minds, and recognize their worth beyond appearance. By promoting education, awareness, and support for those affected by eating disorders, we aim to shift the conversation from striving for perfection to living with purpose, balance, and confidence. Okay, initial thoughts, Sarah.
Well, I will say I really do like the conciseness of Fit for Purpose being the title. I do think that a lot of platforms can get very wordy. And again, as a title holder, as a state title holder, you're having a lot of really quick conversations. So I think as much as you can concisely tell someone what your platform is, I think is always great. As far as the quote, fit for the fight, fit for your future, I think that this is along the right lines. I think it might depend on what your follow-up sentence is after that, because I'm kind of curious about, what is the fight exactly? So
that was my first thought too. What's the fight?
What's the fight? So, I mean, fit for the fight, fit for your future. I think you're on the right track. I don't know if that's the exact sentence.
Depending on if your next sentence explained what you meant by fight, then I could get behind it. But if it doesn't, then it leaves me with more questions that I'm inevitably going to ask you. If you aren't answering it in the paper, you might not want to answer it in person either. So be prepared for that. I have a feeling that because you wrote it, you probably do have a reason for it, and that you could answer it. So be thoughtful about, would you be prepared to include that or speak to it? I also love the conciseness of it. Immediately, I understood what you were going for. I mean, right away, it says it is dedicated, right? This is what it does. Empowers individuals. Embrace your bodies, nourish your minds, recognize your worth beyond appearance. I would expect you to then be going into some of those things in your paper, really talking about the statistics behind those, and then prompting education, awareness, and support. You basically just outlined exactly what I should be prepared to learn about, but also I'm going to want to see the depth of that. Have you educated? Who have you educated? Where did you create awareness? How many people did you help create awareness within? You say that you're going to support. I'm going to want to know data, metrics on those things. So if you give me those specific instances of your impact, I need to see in your paper the how and the depth of that impact. So be prepared for that. I'm sure you probably already have it. But know that those are the types of things I'm going to want to see. Now, I will say, as I was reading this out loud, and I don't know if you agree with this or not, but I got to this ending where we say, we aim to shift the conversation from striving for perfection to living with purpose. And I wanted there to be a period there. And then there was more balance and confidence. And it just felt like the alliteration of perfection and purpose felt like such a powerful ending that I wanted to stop.
Yes. No, I agree with that. And I think I like the idea too. And, you know, this is sort of an area that's part of Girls on the Run. So I'm going to be a little bit biased on this, but I think too, like, I like the idea of the balance, the confidence. Those are important words to use. But like Autumn said, you know, I really like mic drop moments when sentences. And so I do think that would be really good. I think one other thing I thought of while we're talking too, and I know this is just a very brief look over all of the work that you're doing, but I think in both of these cases, I want to know further in your paperwork, what happens if this issue isn't solved? So what happens if law school continues to be like a less accessible opportunity, or a not well-known opportunity to a more wide variety of audiences? What if it continues to be, you know, the same people going to law school over and over again? You know, what happens if people do continue to strive for perfection? What are the consequences of not doing something about this? And again, I know this is more of your
that's an amazing closer.
Yes. Yeah.
I love that. Okay, so then following up, Ms. Harris did say, you know, back to the law school prompt, you know, tagline, demystifying law school and the legal profession. But I just don't have a name yet. I really liked that. And then Amari also says, you know, I am in law school currently. Yes, very male dominated. I see that you asked about what I just said about the closer. She said it glitched. So we were just saying, being able to say in your closing, or even the closing of your paperwork, what happens to the world as a whole if law schools are not accessible to, I'm so sorry, I'm getting random FaceTime calls that I don't want. Go away. Okay. What happens to law schools if women don't continue to apply? If this, you know, what's the result at the end of the day? And you know, the answer would be not enough representation, people not being able to understand, you know, certain issues. You know, you talked about it being a male dominated field. What happens if we don't create and demystify this area? What is the result of that? We were just saying, would make a powerful closing. Anna, going back to the, you know, fitness and for all that one, she said, if even nationally, is it better to focus on one specific audience, like high school, or broaden your audience, include middle school, high school, college, all of it? For me, and Sarah, I'd love to hear your take on this too, but for me, when we talk about youth, that is the audience. Like within there, you can break it down to elementary, middle school, high school, but younger generation encapsulates all of that. And so nationally, I think you have to be able to speak to the entire younger generation. And if you can't, that speaks to a larger issue for me. So no, I wouldn't say focus on just elementary or just high school. You can have a specific audience you think it's more important to target, but you should be able to target the entire younger generation. Would you agree with that, Sarah?
Yeah. Oh, I definitely would say I agree. I think I very strategically planned my different sort of subject areas for different audiences that were all part of my platform, because I wanted to be able to say yes to any opportunity to talk about my platform. So I think thinking about youth, I think, is the most important to consider what your message is, because it's probably the most sensitive group. So I think really knowing what your message is for youth is extremely important. And, you know, we can't lie, like everyone wants to see Miss America with some kids. So like we all love that. So I think really knowing what your message is for youth is extremely important. And I think if you do have a platform that focuses on that just a little bit more, I do think that's okay, because when you talk then to older audiences at like a Kiwanis or Lions or something, you can share what your experience is in talking to those youth and why it's important to you. And I mean, all the anecdotes you can share about your experiences and talking to them, I think it's easier to transfer almost any message to adults.
Mm-hmm.
But knowing really well what your message is when you're going into schools, I think is really important.
And Anna, I even look at your particular platform, right? Fit for purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And I can see how it would behoove you to speak to high schoolers, because that's where they're really questioning their worth beyond appearance, right? But you also would want to be able to talk to, little kids, and hopefully nip that in the butt, right? Like, let's not to grow into questioning our worth, which I unfortunately feel like is inevitable for everyone. We all get to that stage, but perhaps we can help a younger generation to grow up with a different set of affirmations and social media impact, that they can be the generation that has less of it. That would be ideal, but I could see why you would want to target high school specifically. And I think it's okay for you to be like, yes, I'm really passionate about speaking with high schoolers. Here's the stats behind it. Here's the amount of high schoolers I've been impacting, but I still can speak to every audience and older generations too, so that they understand what's happening. But this group, we've got to catch them before it's too late. There's nothing wrong with that. I wouldn't pigeonhole yourself just to high schoolers, because I think you're losing out on the upcoming generation that needs to hear your message too. Yeah. Now, ladies, those of you who are still here, if you have any other questions for Sarah, now is your opportunity to pop them in the chat. Fortunately, you guys were super helpful and already did what I asked you to at the beginning of the call. So we have some awesome feedback that you were able to get specific to you. So way to go. Thank you so much for doing that. And with that note, I also want to thank you, Sarah, for being here this evening, taking time out of your day. You were such a helpful voice in this conversation. And from the get-go, I knew from your Instagram post, I was like, she's my girl. Okay. But also, hearing you talk tonight, I learned so much about you and your growth through all of this, that through pageants, through your different platforms that I didn't even know you had, that I didn't know going into this you were going to be able to share it. It's just like a special surprise for me. So thank you so much for all of your dedication to this evening. We do have one more question really quick from Amari, if we want to go ahead and answer this. She says, answering the closing question, right? So answering what happens if law school remains inaccessible, thinking about things that need nurturing touch, right? Human trafficking, children, SA, DV. You need someone not just that can relate to your situation, but that you can relate to as a whole. Picking a lawyer that is the exact same as picking a physician. You need to be comfortable in sharing parts of yourself that you would normally never share with the public, and trusting that they'll advocate for you in a way that no one has ever done that before. Keeping law school under lock and key eliminates the chance for everyone to find their lawyer, and the one that they are comfortable gaining access to their innermost thoughts and feelings about the scariest things they'll ever have to deal with. So yes, that's a great answer. Actually, where you caught me was keeping law school under lock and key eliminates the chance for everyone to find their lawyer. Like, that piece right there caught my attention out of everything. Really, really enjoyed that. So thank you so much for sharing. But also, Amari, you always share in our master classes, which I so appreciate. Okay, well, thank you again, Sarah. We are so glad to have you in our masterclass tonight. Ladies, thank you for attending. Remember, we will be hosting our November masterclass on the 16th, so please be sure to RSVP for that. And we hope to see you next time here at She Is Motivated.
Thank you, Autumn. Thank you.
Yes.